This week, we are discussing Your Reality, Your Art with Blake Rudis. You are listening to the Lakescape Photography Podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Lakescape Photography Podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Albert, and today we are joined by professional landscape photographer and educator, Blake Rudis. Blake is the founder of F64 Academy, where he helps photographers get the most out of their work, from getting the photo right in the field, to learning the digital darkroom, all the way to building a voice that actually feels like you. If you have ever felt that tension between what you saw and felt and what the internet says your photo is supposed to look like, this conversation is for you. Because today we're talking about reality and how subjective reality is. We're talking about breaking away from the pressure to please purists, algorithms, or expectations, and having the courage to show your version of the scene. Your edit, your choices, your style. These are all things that you should never apologize for. It's embracing your story and sharing the experience, your experience. All of Blake's links are included in the show notes below. Check them out as you enjoy this discussion with Blake Rudis.
Hey, thank you for having me on the show. This is awesome. I really enjoy being here. I'm Blake. I'm a photography educator, landscape photographer with a very weird, odd obsession with Photoshop. And all things art and artistic vision specifically. So.
Very cool. And you also run F64 Academy, which teaches a lot of people about Photoshop and the ins and outs of all this too.
Yes. Yep. F64 Academy. It's kind of like a play on words, but also a play on history. Group F64 was founded by Ansel Adams and several other phenomenal landscape photographers that kind of paved the way for us. They fizzled out, kind of didn't do much with it. And the name was just sitting there. So F64 was a perfect homage to them. And also, I like to go really deep in my education and be very thorough. Just like if you shoot at an aperture of F64, everything would be in detail. So it's kind of a play on words / homage to the past.
That's really neat.
It's a big thing. You know, I think it's really important to kind of dig deep into the history of photography and art in general. You can find a lot of really cool stuff in the past from stuff that people did before us. You know, Ansel Adams he fought the same fight that we're fighting right now in this day and age between AI and real photography and photography being considered an art form. And, you know, it wasn't the same exact fight, but he fought for the passion and the beauty of landscape photography as being an art form.
Yeah, that piece of reality being subjective to, you know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, I think is a really good way to put it. In the sense of some people, they think, well, straight out of camera is the only way to interpret a scene, whether that be with film, digital, whatever approach you're using. But straight out of camera, there's still some form of editing at the sensor level as it's processed. I mean, you're very familiar with this, is the way the sensor interprets it and spits it back out so we can see it on the back of the screen. That's edited.
It is edited and it's also nullified. So, you know, if you think about our eyes don't calibrate white balance. You can walk into any room at any given time and the white balance is always good. It's always the same because your eye is always, and your brain are always measuring that light against what is true and accurate to what white should look like. And therefore, you don't have to worry about a white balance. Whereas in your camera, it has to worry about a white balance. But the other thing that it has to worry about is the fact that once it adjusts the white balance, it's adjusting for white, which means it has to go more blue or more yellow because that's how white balance is adjusted for. But the problem with that is that all of your colors will shift. So if you're perfect example, a lot of people struggle with foliage in your fall foliage, your autumn foliage colors. We have the oranges against a blue sky. If you don't white balance correctly, your oranges will come out less orange because you're balanced for the blue. And if you're balanced for the orange, your blue is going to come out less blue because it's getting more yellow. Your eyes see all that. Okay. This is a conversation that we usually have when it comes to dynamic range, because you might have 14 stops of dynamic range in your sensor, but your eye, a healthy eye and brain, has about 25 stops of dynamic range. So right there alone, your camera is not recording tone or color in the way that a viewer, a real person, interprets that scene, period. So now you do have the computational stuff that happens. If you're shooting in JPEG, there's definitely the computational stuff that's happening in the camera to ensure that that image comes out beautifully. Because especially in the phone world, this is annoying as all get out. I have a Google Pixel 10 Pro. I was just teaching a workshop on the Oregon coast at sunset, and we're looking at it through our camera, and I pull out my phone to take a picture of it. I'm like, look at the difference in this, guys. I had everyone come over. We looked at the back of the camera, and the image looks like crap. Scene's beautiful. You look at the back of the phone camera, and it's this elaborate, beautiful, gorgeous sunset. And it's like, well, the reason why people are so invested in their phones is because the phone is not doing any more phone things. It's just being a better camera, you know? So it's just, there's a lot of computational stuff that happens there. So reality is really subjective to the individual that was there. And I like to take the stance of creating an experience for the viewer rather than showing them reality. So whatever that experience feels like to me is what I want to show in the image that they're seeing at the end of the day.
That's a very good stance. That's the same way that I've always approached art as well. And especially like how you mentioned white balance, you know, and it ties into so many different aspects of what we're physically doing with the camera on location and how we want to interpret that scene to accurately represent it. Because, you know, in the same sense that as we adjust white balance, the colors change. Well, as we adjust our exposure, the intensity of colors changes. If we go dark, we're going to get more bold colors. If we go light, we're going to get more pastels or more washed out color. And as you mentioned too, you know, if you're shooting JPEG, you're shooting RAW, one thing that kind of made the light bulb come on in my head when I really started taking a deep dive into processing was it doesn't matter what you're seeing on the back of the camera, because as the camera processes that RAW, it's still showing you a JPEG preview on the back of the camera. So you really are almost obligated to bring that emotion, that expression back into the scene in post-processing. I feel like it's a two-part process of you have to do what's right in the field to get the data, but you also have to have a plan through the back end to know what data you need and how you're going to interpret that to share that memory, that emotion, and that visual interpretation of the experience.
Exactly true. And you're speaking the exact same language that I teach my subscribers. Collect the data on the scene, but feel the emotion of the place around so that you can build that experience later. And knowing what you need to focus on. The big question you have to ask yourself when you're editing really is, what do I want the viewer to focus on? You know, that's the focus. That's what you should be focusing on in post. And while you're on location, you're focused on something. And you'll take the picture, and then, you know, this happens to me all the time. I've got 3 kids and a business to run. So I'll go out and I'll do a workshop, and I'll come home, and 2 months later, I'm processing the images. And I'll look at it, I'll say, well, why did I shoot this? But when I was there, I clearly made a connection with something in that space. So a lot of times what I'll do now is the A1, and several cameras do this now. They allow, like on playback, you can record your voice into the camera. And that'll put a little audio file right next to the image where you're in the preview. So what I'll do is I'll say things like, okay, Blake, when you're processing this, you are going to forget that there's this beautiful pink light that is just washing the entire beach with just gorgeous pink reflections. But when you take a picture, you'll notice that that pink is not there at all. And that's what we're talking about. There's the white balance. So then we go back to process. You process that for that pink that you know you saw. And then somebody else is like, well, you know, that doesn't look real. well, it doesn't look like a photo is what you're saying, but it looks like my experience is what I'm trying to tell you, because the experience that I'm giving to that individual is a gift, right? That's how we have to look at this, is that when I make something for somebody to see, and I'm going to put 5, sometimes 6 hours of work into an image, that's a gift that I want to show the world. So I have to make sure that not only do I wrap it beautifully, but that what's inside that package is what they want to see. And often I think more people spend time on the wrapping than they do the gift, and assume that the person that's opening it is going to love what's inside. Like, it doesn't matter if you spent 45 minutes making this beautiful outer wrapping, if you can't polish a turd, right? So you can, but it's just still a turd. At the end of the day, you have to have that good data that you can then wrap in the experience. And then when the viewer has an open mind to open that gift, they see that experience as you wanted it to unfold.
That's a very good way to put it. And I've noticed that with editing my images as well, where sometimes I'll sit on something for a while and I'll come back and I'm just like, this picture sucks. What was I even doing? Like, why did I take this? Or on the flip side, you come back, you thought that something was great in the field, and when you bring it back, you see it on the big screen, you think, well, maybe this isn't as good as I thought it was. And there's this interesting thing that I've noticed happens when I'm looking back on my images, or when I'm culling images after a trip. The ones that I really connect with, the ones that I just feel that creativity just shoots forward, and it's like, yes, I have that vision. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. The edit just comes easy. It's natural. You flow with it, and the pieces just kind of fall together. But then there's other shots that maybe you don't touch right away. Maybe they just don't feel right or whatever. They're almost too complex, or there's too many distractions. There's too much going on in the image to translate that into that emotion, or into that gift that you were describing there. And early on in my experience, I would actually get discouraged and think, well, I must just really suck, because I took these great images, but then all these other ones are bad. I can't figure out how to edit this. Like, this is just not working. It's a combination of the data being right out there, and then having that simple, refined scene and that vision to bring it together, because editing is that translation piece of, this is what I saw, this is how I felt, this is the gift that you just described.
Yeah. So here's a hack for you. I studied neuroscience for like 5 years to produce a course on the artistic vision, but from a neuroscience perspective, to basically prove that anybody can discover their vision if they do it from a neuroscientific perspective, rather than some people will say, well, our artistry is only for artists. No, it's for everybody. Everyone has the capability of doing it. You're just not tapping into the right places. But here's a hack for you. So if you take your thumb, and whoever's listening, or if you want to do this right now, just look at your thumb. Okay. And when you look at your thumb, look directly at your thumb. Can you read anything that's around your room when you're looking at your thumb? Probably not. So what happens here is our brain can only focus on 2% of what's in our field of view. Okay. So now when you're on location and you see something that you really like, you're only focused on 2% of the scene. Okay. But your camera, if you're at F11, let's say, it's focused on everything. So those images that we aren't sure what we liked about it, or the chaos, it's a perfect example. I've been processing forest imagery, like from the redwoods, and man, that is chaos. You've got a carpet of texture, whether that's leaves, pine needles, broken branches, foliage. Then you have the tree trunks that have their own texture. Then you have the chaos of branches just going everywhere that looks like, prickly thorns when you take a three-dimensional object and turn it into a three-dimensional scene and turn it into a two-dimensional object. So when I go into forest, when I did in the past, when I would go into those forest scenes, I would love what I was looking at. But then when I get home, I'm like, these are all crap. Every one of these is crap. Not a single one of these is great. Well, that's because I was looking at it for the face value of every bit of detail that was in that scene. But when I was there, my mind was only focused on 1% to 2% of that scene. So that's where we need to draw that attention for the viewer, is on that 1% to 2% of that scene. They shouldn't be taking in the whole image. If they're taking in the whole image, you didn't do it right, in my opinion. You should be guiding the viewer to a certain spot, and it's up to us to pay attention to what that spot is, and then let the whole editing process go towards that. And then once you do that, then you can cut that chaos, and all those competing textures now become things of the past, because you're focused on the light that's coming in and not the texture and all that stuff that you're never going to be able to process accurately. You have to just whittle it down into what's the most important thing. So that's our brain working against us constantly. We see what we like on the scene, but that's only 2% of the entire scene. But then we get home and we have 100% of the scene. So now cutting through the chaos is really what that entails, is where do I want the viewer to focus? So we have to know where we focus. That's why I really like to take either mental notes. Sometimes I'll take video notes. Sometimes I take mental notes. Sometimes I may take a note on like a notepad on my phone. Sometimes I take notes by directly speaking into the camera next to the image. That way, when I come home, it's all fresh in my mind, because I'm like, oh, that's what I was looking at. That's what I was looking at. That way I don't have to worry about trying to cut through all that chaos. I already did it while I was on location.
Yeah, that's a really good tip for people that I think has helped me a lot in the field. I actually have a notepad on my cell phone as well, and I have it out. Blake can see it, you guys can't, but I have this little notepad, just a little 3-inch notepad that I carry in my bag with me, and I kind of picked it up during my film days, where I would write down, okay, I'm on this roll, this exposure, these are my settings, blah, 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 blah. And I noticed that in the field, sometimes you want to take those same notes for different reasons, where maybe there's a beam of light shooting across, or, hey, I really liked the soft light on this dune grass in front of the lake, or whatever you're doing. You just write down the shot number, you write down the little details, or, if you have a camera that can take those notes, do that, because that's going to help you translate those emotions and breathe life into your images. Because one thing that I think is challenging, especially in today's day and age with AI, and we'll get into all this here shortly, but the post-production piece as expression, and being able to give yourself direction, being able to guide yourself and point to, I like these trees, I like the way the light hit this water, I like these fine little contrasts on these rocks, whatever it might be, to be able to guide yourself to that. And like Blake said, have a plan to get there. That's critical.
Yeah, I draw all over my images. Like, that's one of the things that I've been teaching my subscribers now. I take a magenta pen for the highlights and a cyan pen for the shadows. And it's only like a 6-pixel brush that you then draw a path of light. Like, this is anything that I want the viewer to look at, I do it in magenta. And anything I don't want them to look at, I'll scribble on it in cyan. And I do that on its own layer, so that as I'm working on the image, I can turn that layer on and off. And when I turn that layer on and off, it shows me just how far I need to push everything in the image. And that's been exponentially helpful. And that's something I've just started doing within the last, I don't know, maybe year and a half, 2 years. I should have thought of that from my analog days, because, when we were shooting analog film, the first run of a print was never the run, right? You'd expose your images in the camera, you'd take your roll of film, and then you'd develop your roll of film, and then you take your roll of film and you bring that onto the enlarger, you'd make a test print, then you'd make one print, and then you'd realize all the areas in that print that were bad, and then you'd cut things out and dodge and burn and do all this crazy stuff just to make that one print perfect, But what did we do? We took a Sharpie and we drew all over those film images, and we would put second numbers, like, okay, this part needs 5 seconds, this needs 3 seconds, this needs 2 seconds. when we go away with that, when you do away with that, you are doing away with the importance of editing. I think a lot of people just see all the sliders and numbers everywhere, and then that's chaos. So how like my subscribers ask me all the time, and this is kind of in line with this, is Blake, when do you know the image is done? And I'll tell them, well, the image is done when I know that the viewer has seen what I want them to see. Well, that doesn't give me enough, Blake. How do you know when it's done? Well, that's like saying, okay, I'm going to drive up to the Great Lakes and come visit you. I don't know where you live. I don't have a GPS, but I know it's north of Kansas City. So I'm just going to get my car and drive north. That's what most people are doing with their images. They're just getting in the car and driving north. So now if you gave me MapQuest, I could get some directions, print them out. That gives me a good idea of how to get there. That might be a raw file and moving that image from raw into Photoshop. But if you give me a GPS, it gives me direct guidance that goes directly to where you live. I can get there in the most efficient way. And I know when the end is there because I've reached where I'm going to meet you. Okay. So a lot of times people just go into the editing process with, I don't know where I'm going. Okay. Well, if you don't know where you're going, you would never get in a car and just drive north. You wouldn't do that in this day and age. So why are we doing that with our photos? And why aren't we picking up some of the things from the past? I even talked about, Ansel Adams in here. I picked up, there's 3 books that Ansel Adams has that I think every digital photographer today needs to read. It's The Camera, The Negative, and The Print. Now, these are 3 books that were written in the 80s, even before I was born. But these books have a wealth of knowledge in them about the art of creating an image from the camera all the way through to the print. And you might think, well, these are just old books. How are they going to help me in the digital world? Well, they teach you the foundational stuff. They teach you to build a plan. Most of the time, most educators just have you, just go out and take a picture of this and then use my presets. It's like, that's like telling me that if I can get to your place by driving north and then taking a right on such and such road, it doesn't give me what I need to get there, because I think a lot of times we don't do our due diligence on what we need to do to get there.
That is something that it took me a while when I first got into digital to really find my way in having a plan and being consistent. And that's something that I think it does. It intimidates a lot of people because, like you said, you get in there, you've got sliders everywhere. You jump into Photoshop. Well, now you have to understand layers and masking. You need to know what channels do. You need to understand all these different things. And it's intimidating. I know the first time I opened Photoshop and I looked at it, I was like, where am I? What does any of this do? And as you practice more and you do tutorials and workshops and, like F64 Academy, I was doing a lot of stuff with F64 Academy where I'd jump in and I'd watch your tutorials and I'd watch different breakdowns and all kinds of stuff as to how all these different pieces came together. And eventually, like you said, you stop just blindly driving north and you begin understanding, okay, well, I need to open the image. The first thing I need to do is this. And then from there, I need to move to this and then to this. And you build this system. And I don't know, me personally, once I feel like I've arrived, I'll put the picture away for a few days and then I'll come back and I'll look at it and kind of let it marinate a little bit before I'm 100% satisfied, because there's been a few times where I'm like, yes, this looks awesome. And then I come back the next day and I look at it and I'm like, what was I thinking? Why is my sky so cartoony? What happened here?
It's a brain thing too. That's a complete brain thing. This is the way I look at that one. If you take a pair of yellow tinted sunglasses and you put them on, when you first put them on and look around, you're like, what everything is just yellow and horrible and disgusting. Give it 3 minutes. That's all your brain needs. And white becomes white again. And that yellow is non-existent. So what happens is when we put ourselves in front of our computer and we're editing like that, I will often have it up on Photoshop. My computer goes to sleep once I leave the room. I come back into my office. With every image, I will never let an image be done until I've looked at it at least 4 times in this way. and I'll leave my office for, 5-10 minutes, maybe go get lunch, maybe make a cup of tea or whatever, come back, wiggle my mouse. I'm like, whoa, what was I thinking? Okay, reassess, taper this back, delete this layer, pull this down, do that. Okay, cool. Then again, leave the room, come back. There's this desire to want to just show everyone everything really quickly as soon as we get done with it. But there's something in that, just letting it marinate and letting it sit. You come back and you realize, because your brain will trick you and it will make you think that your sky does not look like a cartoon because you've been looking at it for too long. You're too close to it. I think that's kind of why critique is so important. Having a second set of eyes of a trusted person. You don't want to have anyone critique your images. You definitely don't want the Facebook world critiquing your images, but you have a trusted person that you can say, hey, can you take a look at this? And then maybe there's a specific place you want them to look, or maybe you just want their general assessment. A second set of eyes is always great. I usually use my wife because she knows nothing about photography and could care less, to be honest with you. But she's my viewer. She's the person that would be buying a print on the wall. So if it doesn't look good to her, if she sees it and says, I don't like that, that's too this, I'm like, I can't be like, well, you don't know what you're talking about because you're not a photographer. No, she's the viewer. She's the end result, guys. Let someone who you trust look at it. They don't have to tell you exactly what to do, but they can give you guidance on what they don't think is right.
Yeah. Shout out to all of our spouses out there, because I do the same thing with my wife. She'll tell me if she sees something and she's like, that sky does not look real, or what happened to these rocks? Why is this so bright? Like, all I can look at is this. This is where my eye goes immediately. Is this picture just doesn't make sense. Having that second opinion from someone who isn't a photographer, that doesn't know the process and I wouldn't word it as doesn't necessarily care, but doesn't have invested interest. That's huge. And
yeah,
just having that feedback is so helpful.
And it's even better with your spouse, because the longer you're with them, the harder it is to wow them.
Yes.
Like when we were dating, I could wow my wife with just about anything. And now it's like, man, I got to do a lot of work. We've been married 15 years. It takes a lot of work for me to wow her. So if I show her an image and she goes, oh, that's nice, I'm like, I worked my ass off on this. And you're saying this is nice?
Yeah.
Like, so when she goes, oh my gosh, that's amazing, I know I made something really, really good.
Yes. Yep. I was thinking about that this morning. I was editing a couple images, and she came into my office and she looks, and I asked her, like, hey, what do you think about this? She's like, it's cool. And I was like, all right. Well, that means that it's moderately okay. It's not wow, but it's something, because I'm sure you've experienced the same, where she'll walk into your office and she'll look and she'll be like, oh my God, I love that. And it's just like, yes, I did good. This is great. And then you kind of have to walk that fine line of, is this great? Is this amazing? Or is this, oh, that's cool?
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. It's like, you don't like the gift I wrapped you, honey.
Yeah. It's that editing as translation piece. And, I think that as we talk about, possibly going too far or potentially crossing that line of, we'll call it tasteful editing versus fabricating a scene, which is something that seems to really be, we'll say, I don't want to word it as common, but it's becoming more and more prevalent in landscape photography, where, going back to the straight out of camera thing, people, they criticize, or they look at something and they say, well, that's too perfect, or there's no way that looked like that, or what have you. It's the different genres, right? So when we are talking artistic landscape photography, I feel like that's an open palette. Like, I'm not endorsing going into AI and saying, hey, replace my entire sky and make this water perfect and blah, 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 blah. No, not anything like that, but having the ability to use the tools to accentuate the light, or maybe darken an area that you don't want the eye to go to, or and knowing how to do this kind of stuff, that's huge. I mean, for you, where do you draw that line between interpretation and fabrication, or is that just the wrong way to think about it altogether?
To me, it goes back to the experience thing. And I'm a very fantastical person who still loves my childlike imagination. I adore it. And I'm not going to nullify it. I'm not going to quell it. And if I feel the need to make something dance and feel fantastic, I'm going to do it. If I feel the need to make it photorealistic and be an accurate representation, I'll do it. But see, I'm an artist, and I've been an artist my whole life. I started painting when I was like 7 years old, 5, 6 years old early, about 5, 6 years old with Bob Ross and Saturday morning cartoons. He was on PBS before, and there was nothing else to watch and everyone was asleep. So I would get colored pencils and try to follow along with Bob Ross at like 6 years old. And that ended up turning into your Crayola watercolors, which turned into oil paints by the time I was 12, which then I put that on a hiatus and started sculpting. And then I went to college and became a printmaker and a sculptor. And then after that, I picked up painting again. And then after painting, I picked up photography again. So for me, it's hard for me to talk like that as a straight photographer, because I want to build an experience, and I'm going to use every ounce of my artistry to do it and every ounce of my artistic vision to do it. And I love the imaginative, and I really enjoy when a piece comes together. But I'll be honest with someone. If someone, I'll even say it in my Facebook post or something that this used AI or this element wasn't there, or I'll show them the before. Because part of it is, if I'm being honest, I think we all like to know that we can make a crap before image turn into a phenomenal after image. But you get those, naysayers out there that say this is no longer a photograph. And I'm like, yeah, well, what is your metric for a photograph? And a lot of times they'll drop the Ansel Adams. And I'm like, have you not looked at anything that Ansel Adams has ever done in a book? Because he will show you what the original exposure looked like, which looks like our raw files. And then he shows you the final result, which looks like what we do when we're done editing. This is something that's been going on for decades, for a century. The digital darkroom is just an extension of the analog darkroom. So with me, I'm a kind of a no holds barred kind of person. If somebody wants to use whatever they want to use to put something in their image, I'll embrace it, because I embrace the art side of it. Now, if this is a journalistic photograph of the president, no, I don't want that to be altered, because scenes need to be scenes without altering it, because then altering those types of scenes, you're now getting into, conspiracy type of stuff or agendas being portrayed that we see in the media these days. But when it comes to landscape photography, I don't want to see someone's before image as the after. I want to see what their mind processed that as. And whatever that takes, I say do it. Whatever it takes to get your vision out there, do it. And as long as it's done well, nobody really minds. But there's sometimes where you ever seen those shows where those baking shows where they have to replicate a cake, and it's this beautiful, ornate, gorgeous cake. And then you look at the one that was made and it's like, yeah, you really nailed that one. If it looks like that, then it's not a gift anymore, or it's a gift with tape all over it that wasn't wrapped very well. So
Right.
Whole experience from the gift that's on the inside to the wrapping on the outside, when that whole experience comes together, I don't think that the viewer minds as much. But I will say there's a lot of jealousy out there in the industry too. So when you do put that stuff out there, and this goes for anybody, when I put something out there and someone says, I like the before better, the first thing I do, especially if it's Facebook, is I click on their profile and I assess who this individual is and what their skill level is. Because more often than not, if it's a photographer, they've got a photograph up there. And then you can assess if you should be listening to this person or not. Because if you look at their images and it's just a bunch of basically them showing you their contact sheet from what we would call the analog world after you take your exposures but don't process them, then there's no validity in what they're saying. And there's more than likely a hint of jealousy that's behind their comment. And that jealousy usually comes from either A, them not wanting to do that much work, or B, not knowing how to do that much work. And therefore, they would rather rest on the before than accept the after.
That makes perfect sense. And I feel like that's a very true statement, in the sense of you'll never be criticized by someone who is doing more than you.
And that's also a good thing. Before you get defensive, ask the why. Well, why is it that you like the before better? I'm very curious so that I can make the after better, rather than going straight to offense. Because I'm the type of person who goes straight to offense. Like, and I know that offense is, we choose to be offended or not, right? But I don't take criticism very well, and I know that very much about myself. So it actually takes a lot for me to just say, okay, take a breath, walk away, and come back, because we're very close to this stuff and we love this stuff. Like, what we're doing is essentially a version of love. So when someone puts that down, it's like, well, I really like that, and I want to be mad at them for this. But you have to sometimes you can get some really good value out of that by just saying, well, what is it that you don't like? And that's a great thing in general. When you're being critiqued and someone says, I don't like this. Okay, that's great. But what don't you like about it? It's like, I tell my wife, I don't like peas. I can't stand peas. And she's like, well, what don't you like about them? I said, they taste like dirt, and I don't like the way they pop in my mouth. It's a very valid reason to never eat peas. But if I just said I don't like peas because I don't like them, that's dumb. Like, I'm never going to do that. I have to have a reason why I don't like something. So yeah, I think that's something that you can take into those conversations when you're getting critique too, is not just assessing the individual's skill level, but asking them why and what they don't like so that you can make what it is better.
Especially in today's day and age, without going off on a tangent or anything, but there's a lot of keyboard warriors out there that just want to be critical. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. There's positives and negatives of everything. But to your point, if you come across one of these people that is a purist, that hates any type of editing, of course they're going to be critical of your work, but you have to consider the source. In looking at their work and looking at what they're doing, yeah, if their work is exactly what you aspire to, then definitely take that criticism and ask them, dig deeper, see if you can get feedback out of that. Whereas if it's somebody that just their style is of zero interest, okay, cool. Thanks for the feedback. Have a nice day.
And that's kind of what happened on that post that you reached out to me for with the trees. Someone has mentioned you completely missed the point of landscape photography. The point is to continue to go back to the place over and over and over again until everything lines up perfectly. Well, no, that's a point. That is not the point. And it's clearly not the point when I live in Missouri and I traveled, 3,000 miles to go to the Redwoods in Northern California. I've got 3 kids and a very busy business to run. I can't go back there 6, 7, 8, 9 times in a year to get that stuff perfect. But I know what perfection would look like, and I know what my experience is. So when I see that scene, I see the scene that I ended with. That's what I see. That's what my vision sees. I don't see the crap data that I was pulling from that. So my response to him was like, that is your point and your perspective for landscape photography. But my point and my perspective is that I want to be able to give you the best experience. So why would I go 3,000 miles out of my way, take a bunch of photos, realize that the light wasn't right, and never do anything with them because what? So I think that most people who are purists, I really honestly believe this, is that most of them, when they understand what they can do in Photoshop with that work, they get on board with you. They understand, because I think most people that are at that purist point either A, don't know how, or B, don't want to take the time that it takes to get that type of image. But if you're a purist in today's day and age and you're taking a picture with your camera, as we've already discussed, and you're doing it straight out of camera, you're doing straight out of justice. There's no justice that you're doing for that image because of all the things that we've already just talked about. So it's almost our responsibility as an artist, photographer, to give that experience in the way that it can be given. So, I actually enjoy having conversations with purists because they usually go back to the Ansel Adams thing. And that's when I can just be like, okay, here we go. Let's do it. Let me show you some, before and afters of Ansel Adams' work, because he understood that. He understood that you're not always going to get the best light when you're there. But is it about having the best light, or is it about having artistic vision? Because those are two very different things. I love overcast days. To me, those are the best. I would rather shoot in an overcast day than a sunset that's blinding. Now, the photograph from a sunset that's blinding is going to be gorgeous. Absolutely. But what I can do with an overcast day, I have almost infinite possibilities of what I can do with that image. But what you get with an image that comes from a very blown out, there's the sun's just gorgeous and the light is perfect. Well, it's only perfect for that instance. But knowing what you know about post production, you can do just about anything with an overcast image. You can even paint light that looks like the sun in Photoshop. And some would say, well, that's fake. No, it would be that way. That's the thing. You don't understand. It just wasn't that way when I was there. But that's why I don't mind sky replacements, because as long as you're not putting, the Milky Way in a northern facing image, you know, anything goes, as long as you're not. I do have some kind of rules, I guess, in that regard, that I'm not going to put a Milky Way in a north facing shot, because then if somebody else goes there, there's no way they're ever going to capture that shot, because we're shooting towards the south when we're shooting the Milky Way.
All valid, because I've done the same thing where there's this one image that I have from Wisconsin. There's this old cobblestone building that's almost gone. And when I posted it, I put in the description that the Milky Way does not rise in the way I have it positioned in that image. Because similar to you, if I've taken both images, I'm not necessarily against sky replacements. I have to have that vision, that piece that drives me to that. But in that particular scene in Wisconsin, I had a whole bunch of people commenting on it saying, well, Madison is right behind that. It would be way too bright to get the Milky Way that detailed from where you're standing. And even though there was a little blurb at the very bottom of my post that said, this is a composite, I shot the Milky Way facing south while I was shooting this building at the same time, and I just put the two together. You have to have that discernment of, I need to be honest, but then people also need to read the whole explanation of what's happening.
This goes back to, so Albert Bierstadt is one of my favorite early landscape painters. And there's an image that he has of a waterfall with a bear drinking out of a lake with a big mountain in the background and like beautiful trees. And it looks like something that you would see in Northern California or something like that, like in Truckee or something like that. And as I was doing my research on this painting, I read a lot about it, and it stated that this is a composite, essentially, of many of the places that Albert Bierstadt visited when he was in the Sierra Nevada area. So he found the mountains of this spot. He found the waterfall, probably from Yosemite. He found that lake, maybe from like Yosemite. And then he found this sky that was painted here from another place. And then when he made the painting, he painted it all from various different things that he experienced to make one continuous experience for the viewer when they look at it. Now, when you look at it for face value, like, I want to go there. Where is that place? Well, you're never going to find it. But, he was also in the same world as a painter. You would know that there's just places you're not going to find, because unless the painter said, I've only paint things that you can see, you just kind of know that a painter makes art. So we look at that from a painting perspective, and we accept that as human beings. Why can't we accept that in the digital world of art? Like, so what? I told you I'm not creating a photo for you. I am creating an experience for you. So why are you looking at this of the lens that it's a photo, other than maybe your inability to accept that? That's not on me, that's on you. But in this age of keyboard warriors, I found that a lot of people, when they say that kind of stuff to you, that's an opportunity for me to pray for that person, because they probably have a lot of really internal crap going on inside them that they think that it's acceptable to say that kind of stuff online. So imagine the conversations that person is having in their head about themselves and everything else around them on a daily basis, that they think it's acceptable to go in a public forum and try to make you look like crap because you made a good piece of art for them. That person has a lot of dirt going on inside them. And more than likely, we have a lot more of that than you would think, because of the way that it's tough. Every day is stress. And as human beings, we were not meant to take in all of the stuff. We are actually only meant to take in what's local. In your house is most important. What's outside of that is probably next important. And then what's outside of that, who cares? That's how we were supposed to live. But now we know what's going on in Ethiopia. And for some reason, that's got someone so riled up that's in their mind when they're looking at your images on social media. And you don't even know what posts they just came from. And they could be completely disgruntled from the algorithm that is plaguing their mind. And now they're talking about your photograph. So that's a really deep thing that I think goes a lot deeper than just looking at pictures. I think the negative stuff that comes out like that is a lot of the conversation that person is having in their head about themselves, about what they think art is. And when that bleeds out onto us, we can take offense to that, but we shouldn't. That's something where we're just like, man, yeah, I wonder what that person's going through, and then that's where I just take a time to stop and just think about them, for them, whatever that might look like, and then go about my day. Because I don't think that and this happens in email all the time, I do marketing emails and I'll shoot something out and someone will leave me something nasty. I mean, sometimes these are dropping F-bombs and all kinds of things. And I'm like, whoa, hold the horses here. I'll email them and say, hey, look, I'm a human being on the other end of this. I realize that you might not like a marketing email. I don't even like marketing, but I got to feed my family. So here's the deal. I'm going to act like this never happened. And if you have a question, or imagine we're sitting across the table at a coffee shop, talk to me in that way. And then we'll see what level ground we can get on. 99% of the time I get an apology, and then a great relationship happens after that. And it's almost a canned response I have now in my Gmail. When I get an email like that, it's just like, okay, here we go. Here's another one. But I'm telling you, there have been people that I thought would never buy anything from me or look at another tutorial of mine because of an email that they sent that was like that. But the minute I showed them a little bit of grace and showed them, hey, we can have a conversation, I'm a human being, completely changed everything. So I think they want us to fight back. But if we come back with grace, it's a little bit different. I don't always do that. There's times where you can catch me on a bad day and I'm going to come back and the first sergeant in me comes out and I want to just scream and yell at them. But then I have to remind myself, like, hey, don't stoop to that level. Come on, be kind.
I mean, as the son of a Marine, I 100% understand that, where, it really depends on the day and the level of coffee consumed at that point for the tolerance of what response you're going to get.
Yeah, but it all plays in, and like that's the thing that people don't realize. Like you might think that that's a side quest conversation, but it's not, because art is us. Everything that we create is an extension of who we are as a human being. Just like my arm, like I tell my subscribers all the time, I'm raising my children to be upstanding individuals in society that, kinds of people you want to hang out with. But when they leave my house, I have no clue what kind of kid that is. I really don't. So when I get reports from the teachers, I'm not like, that couldn't be my son. No way. I'm like, all right, boy, we need to talk. What's going on here? Okay. And boy is a term of endearment. My dad called me boy. It's just, yeah, it's a loving phrase, I promise. But when we take that into context, our art's the same way. I created my kids and I'm trying to ensure that those kids are great people when they leave this house. I create my art and I want to make sure that it's a great thing that leaves this space. But when it comes out, when it leaves my office, I can't speak for it anymore. The image has to speak for itself. So when you get those types of comments and you get that kind of reaction, you have to ask yourself, well, what is this image speaking to them and why are they feeling that way? Because our images are a conversation. Our images are going to speak to the viewer. And when we aren't there to speak for it, it has to speak for itself. And there might be a disconnect between what you've put in that image and what the person is receiving.
Do you believe that criticism is a sign that you're doing something distinct, that your work or your style is beginning to stand on its own, per se?
I think it depends on where you're getting the critique from. But yes, that could very well be that. It could very well be that. I say that because I live in two camps, where I've got my Facebook community and then I have my F64 Elite community, which is paying members that show that they want to be there with their wallet, essentially, if we're being honest. So they have some passion behind that, and they're going to talk to you a different way than somebody will talk to you on Facebook. So I think that it really depends on where the criticism and the critique is coming from, in my opinion. But yeah, I think there's something to that.
It's that authentic vision of, in social media, there's canned photos that are easy to obtain and just as easy to forget. And the reason being is that vision piece. It's your reality. you need to impress your reality into your art. And then it becomes personal, recognizable. It's a process where, yeah, we all love being outside. We all love hiking and the creation experience, but the creation doesn't necessarily stop once you press the shutter button and it's saved onto your memory card. Creation continues all the way until, like you said, you put it out into the world and it needs to stand on its own. And I really like your ethos, your approach of, I'm going to use whatever tools, whatever skills, and if I don't have those, I'll go out there and I'll find them and I'll learn these pieces because I want to put that style or that experience into this before I let it go out into the world to stand on its own. And I think that's beautiful. It's literally bringing your style to life, bringing your experience to life, and being able to share that with other people. That's incredible.
That's exactly what it is at the end of the day. We're providing a piece of ourselves to the world when we make art. That's what artists have done since the beginning of time. And like, to me, this is nothing new, as an artist, because I was classically trained. I got my degree in printmaking and sculpture. So I've been surrounded by this stuff for a long time, which I think is a beautiful thing. Something I'm very fortunate for. But there's a lot of people in the digital photography world that have not had that formal training, or even people around them that accept that. When you're surrounded by other artists, they accept that. And not only that, they encourage you and they want to bring life into your vision just as much as they want you to bring life into theirs. And, there's, in printmaking, we would do print exchanges where, we're building these prints as a gift for everybody else so that we can all exchange a piece, so we can all carry a piece of each other away from that class that we had together. And, that's what art is. To me, that's the crux of it. That's at the end of the day, that's what it should be. But there's a lot of competition in photography. And for what reason? Like, why? Where did that come from? Who started that? Why do we feel that way? This should be something where we, that's why I've never hidden a tool, a tip, a technique, or anything from anybody, period. I don't have signature things that only I do that I will not show anybody else. I show everybody everything I do. And I do that because I want them to maybe grab something from that helps them create that signature for themselves. But if I'm an educator and I'm going to withhold information from you, there's no point in being an educator. Like, my goal should be to ensure that you, if you're following me, do not need my education in the next 5 to 10 years. I should have given you so much that you'd never need to come back to me, unless you want to say hi. That's cool. But that's what we should be doing and striving for, because that's where growth comes from, and that's life-giving.
It is. And years ago, it was probably a decade ago now, maybe not that long ago, but one thing that we talked about before this podcast episode was that Blake had actually been on an episode of another podcast with Nick Page. And I remember listening to that conversation. I still remember where I was at on the road driving home, where you were talking about the same exact thing about transparency and about how there is no point to teaching if you're not going to show the full process. And it's something that you and Nick Page both agreed upon. And I'll never forget it. As soon as I got home, I came inside, I opened my laptop, I went to F64 Academy and I signed up, and I learned a ton of stuff. I went from the basics all the way through into the more complex stuff. A year or so ago, you just released that color course, and bought that right away and went through that. And it really leans into that bringing your style to life piece of finding the people that are aligned with what you want to do and where you want to take your work, and then just relentlessly finding resources to do it. In this case, Blake, you're F64 Academy helped a ton. I bought some of Nick Page's tutorials and watched a bunch of his videos and all that stuff. And it's guided my work since, because the tools and the understanding and the know-how. And today I can look at my work and I'm proud of it, but it's that reward of being true to yourself, not trying to compete with anyone, not trying to say, oh, well, one of my friends just went to this place in the Great Lakes or wherever, and they got this awesome shot. I'm going to go out there tomorrow morning and I'm going to do it better. If you're not doing photography for yourself and you're not learning because you have an authentic love for the process, start to finish, my personal opinion, you're in it for the wrong reasons.
It'll show in your work.
Mm-hmm.
It will show. Absolutely, it will.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I don't look at people. I used to do that. I used to look at people's images and say, I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna do it better. But now I look at it and say, man, that's a beautiful shot. I love what they've done there. I want to go there and see what I can do with that and look at it from my perspective, because I love the perspective that they gave me. But it doesn't matter. I've been through this enough that, back in the beginning of my landscape photography days, I think I had the competitive mode where it was, I'm going to go there, I'm going to do it better. And then when I would get there, I'd realize, wait, I can't, because I can't do it like they did it. And then over and over, the repetition of not being able to do it like they did it gets you to realize, and this is just like me as a painter, I could never paint like Van Gogh. I love Van Gogh's work. I love the Hudson River School painters, but I can't paint that way. My painting style comes out different. And I hated my painting style. Other people loved it. I hated it. So I stopped painting. But I can't desire to have a painting style that isn't mine, just like I can't desire to have a photographic style that isn't mine, because that is their vision coming out on that. And, if you go there, and the other thing is that now the flip side of that is those are people who go there with experience and knowledge, knowing that this place doesn't look like what they showed me. Let's talk about the other perspective of a new person, a beginning photographer who goes to that location, and their expectation is to see what, a Nick Page or you or myself did. And when they look at it, they're like, this doesn't look anything like what they did. And then they turn around, they get in their car and they leave. There's a big difference, because now there's a jaded mentality that goes into that person just cheated to get to that point. Well, no, hold on a second. That's our vision. Like, you can't downplay the vision part. What you should go into that with is a disposition that has zero expectation. It's like when my wife and I got married, she's like, we're going to do this forever, right? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. She's like, well, how are we going to do this forever? I said, here's what I think will work. And she's like, what? I said, have not low, but have zero expectations of me. Outside of the expectation that I won't cheat on you, have zero expectations of me. And she just laughed kind of like awkwardly, like, that doesn't sound right. I'm like, well, here's the deal. If I do something that is, over the top, like, you're gonna be, whoa, this is so awesome. But if you expect me to always be over the top, you're gonna be very disappointed. So I think we need to go into our landscape photography in the same way, is that you can't have this feeling in your mind. This is one of the things I teach people about artistic vision, is that clear your mind before you go to any location. Go into that with a disposition that is just open-minded. Because if you go into that disposition with, I'm going to see this outlandishly epic sunset that's going to make this fantastic, then you're not going to be very happy, especially if you spent $3,000 to go halfway across the country and drove 3,000 miles or flew 3,000 miles to do it. You're going to be pretty upset the whole time. And this happened to me when I went to Acadia. It was foggy the whole time. And it wasn't until like day 3 of being in just socked in fog. I'm not talking like the kind of fog that delicately plays in the trees. I'm talking the type of fog where you put your hand out in front of you and you can barely see your wedding ring. That kind of fog. So I had to, by day 3, I just had to say, okay, this is what I've been given. What am I going to do with it? Because otherwise I'm going to be very unhappy. And it was beautiful, because that morning I was having a blast with that fog. And then that evening it all lifted and I had a day and a half of beautiful photography the next day. I'd like to think that was a gift for me so that I could be happy when I went home. But that's the concept. Like, I would have been okay with another day of fog had it happened that way, because I changed my disposition and my expectation of that location and used what I was given and had my vision towards what was given.
It builds into the phrase I like to use a lot. It's experience first, photo second. And it really translates to all aspects of the process, from physically being there to, like we've been discussing, the post-processing side where you're putting your actual physical touch, your experience, your emotion on it. And, it takes me back to the fall colors trip that I went on in the Upper Peninsula. The first few days, I was just striking out. It was bluebird skies. Color was spotty. It was mostly brown, like not much for fall color. And I was sitting there like, man, this really blows. Like, what am I going to do? And finally, day 3, the light bulb came on, and I was just like, you know what? I can't change it. I don't have some magic wand. I have to make the best of what I'm given and turn off those expectations and get out there and just try. Just do something. And whatever you come home with is what you come home with. But in my experience, you're going to be way more disappointed if you just say, this is a wash, I'm not doing anything, than if you at least try. And maybe you don't get a dozen keepers. Maybe you get one. That's still a win.
You get one? Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, one's enough for me on a trip. If I get one picture I'm really truly happy with, good.
So I'm good with that too. I just want one. If I get one a month, I get 12 a year. That's all I need. But I don't even get that lucky sometimes. Sometimes I only get 3 a year that I'm like, man, that was my shot this year, I don't shoot as much as most of my peers do though, unfortunately. But
yeah, same. I mean, I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, so life is very busy right now for,
totally.
Trying to get out. And I've tried taking them hiking with me in a few places, and it's interesting. We'll say that the smallest one, he likes to throw rocks at the waterfalls, and the biggest one, he likes to get in the waterfalls. So
There is hope. Mine are 14, 11, and 8. And I'll tell you, they are just chomping at the bit to go with me and take a camera. So, bring them as much as you can and just enjoy the presence of being with them there. And if you get a shot, great. If you don't, who cares? They're going to love that, and that's something I wish I would have done a lot more with them when they were a lot younger. But, now it's great. They love going on trips with me when they're older, because landscape photography is not, I always tell my wife, it's, this is not a fun game. Like, I'm outside when people are sleeping and eating, because that's when the best stuff happens. It's not a very, lots of driving. My oldest found that out. We went to Great Sand Dunes and we drove all over that place. He's like, is this what you do all day when you're out? I'm like, yes, buddy. It's like 7 hours of driving and an hour of shooting.
Yep.
He's like, what? That doesn't seem right. I'm like, hey man, this is what it is.
Yep.
But he enjoyed it. He loved it. So there's a hope for your future with them in there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They love taking pictures with the cell phone and whatnot. So it's been fun.
So I gave my oldest son a camera when he was 2 years old, and we were going all over St. Louis and taking pictures, and I just let him shoot all day. And it was really interesting because that was when I was kind of a fresh, newish photographer. Especially my style was starting to develop, and I started looking through his pictures versus mine at every location we went to, almost like stacking on top of each other. And I enjoyed his perspective so much more than mine, because he was, 2.5 feet tall. So like, I was like, wait, maybe if I just get my tripod lower, I'll get better photos too. And that's what I started doing. Like, I learned from my 2-year-old son how to take better pictures, because, people tell you get lower, get lower, get lower. But until you see it lower consistently, you don't understand. So everything, I mean, I will say that there was probably 150 of shots of my butt because he didn't know what he was doing. But the idea is that, out of the 300 pictures that he took, there was a lot that just showed me get lower, get lower. And I just as much as I learned theology for my children, I also learned, the stuff about my art for my children. It's really great, the stuff that they can teach you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's just an image I just posted a couple weeks ago. It's of Bond Falls, a big waterfall up in the UP. And there were these 3 little rocks. I mean, they're no bigger than a watermelon. And my son, my oldest, he saw it and he was like, Dad, look at this rock. It looks crazy. And it did. It had like all these little ripples in it. It almost looked like a brain just sitting in the water. And when I came, that was on Labor Day weekend. And when I came back for my fall colors trip, I saw it, beautiful fog all across the waterfall. And I put my wide angle on and I just scooted that right up against the rock to make it look way bigger than it actually was. And it turned out to be one of my favorite images. And, going back to what we talked about earlier, I included the description of like, hey, this is what I did in this image and blah, blah, blah. But, it's incredible that you can learn something from your kids, from anybody. And, bringing that into your work, it helps shape that vision, that style. And, I think as long as you do that with ethics and transparency, you're golden. Just, honesty matters.
That's even a topic we didn't even really discuss, but the reality of what you see. I mean, if you take a wide angle lens and get close to something, that's not reality. But more often than not, people will harp on you about your processing versus the camera. It's like I don't know, that's a whole, that could be a whole nother podcast, you know what I mean? But it's the same concept as, the reality of scooting your camera closer to get all that deliciousness in that wide angle lens is very different than looking at everything from a 6 foot or 5.5 foot perspective.
Exactly. And something that we had touched on briefly earlier was AI. And there's been some instances where I've shot at 16, 18 millimeters, whatever, and gotten right up on something. Or maybe I'm taking a step back, shooting at 35 to 50 millimeters, trying to compress a scene a little bit, whatever the case might be. And then you put your editing piece, you breathe your vision into it. And then you're told in the comments, well, this must be AI. This place doesn't exist. This is too perfect. What have you? That going back to criticism, if it almost seems as though if people don't understand, the default is this is either AI or part of it is AI or whatever. And, tying this into the ethics and transparency that I mentioned earlier, I don't use AI generated anything. I like to use my images and build what I feel and what I experience from my images. But now it seems like everybody, if they don't understand something, they're just like, no, that must be AI.
And, we talked about this at the beginning, and I'll tell you again, when people tell you that, that's a great thing, because in this last course I did like 2.5 hours of theory on artificial intelligence and its way of creeping into the artistic world. And aside from details, without zooming into 100% or looking at the fingers, AI does a fantastic job of getting the look. Okay. And when I mean the look, I mean the same look that you see from a Hudson River School painting. That's baked into AI. And it does a very good job of that. So when someone says that looks like AI, I'd be like, sweet, that's awesome. And the reason why I would say that is because then what they're telling you is that this looks so good, it must not be made by a human being. And that's a good thing. That means you've done your job. It's the same when someone says, this looks like a painting, I love it. What they're telling you there is because paintings often bring out emotion from people. But people are often not very emotional about art, especially a regular viewer, unless they understand that their emotions play into their experience of viewing a piece of art. So when someone says that looks like a painting, what they're telling you is this image moved me. I felt something from this. That's a good thing. To me, that's a good thing. If someone calls you out and says that looks like AI, great, sweet. I'm glad you think so. That means that I did a wonderful job on making this image look really, really good, because AI, I don't care who you are or what you think. I know for a fact that AI makes very good looking images. And when I mean the look, I mean, it gets your eye navigated to exactly where that you need to be looking. And that's why we don't pay attention to the details. Let's go back to the beginning of this conversation. The thumb in front of the face. When you look at an AI image, you get absorbed into the position of where they put the light, and you don't see the intricate and gnarly, horrible details until you zoom in and look. I'm like, oh man, this looks like crap. But you don't see that part because you just see the overarching, 10,000 foot perspective of that looks like a really well put together piece. So that's what you're hearing when someone says that looks like AI. They're basically telling you this looks like a really well put together piece. But instead of me giving you kudos for that, I'm just going to go with my default and say this is AI. And it's more of a stab than a compliment, but you can turn that stab into a compliment when you think about it from that perspective.
Yeah. And I like that perspective shift of, instead of taking it, seeing it through a lens of offense, see it through a lens of, hey, I created something so good that people can't tell if it's reality or if it's computer generated. Because I mean, let's face it. Not saying that AI is perfect, but it gets really, really close in a lot of ways, and it's impressive what it can do. But that perspective shift is huge. I think that changes everything.
On the surface, AI looks like it has everything put together, but I've had a lot of conversations with AI about artistic vision because my subscribers come to me and say things like, oh, I've talked to ChatGPT about my artistic vision and it said this, this, and this, but you say this, this, and this. And I've had conversations with ChatGPT about artistic vision. And a lot of times, to me, it sounds like a used car salesman that can bullshit its way really well into a sale. But when it really comes down to it, they have no idea what they're talking about. And that's usually what I get from AI. It's like, this is funny. I love this. If I went down this rabbit hole with my artwork, I would love to see where this took me. And I've even had, discussion, like it was a couple years ago, but I had a discussion with ChatGPT about how to edit an image. And I followed it verbatim on a YouTube video asking it, okay, I did that. What do you want me to do next? Okay, I did that. What do you want me to do next? And then just kind of laughing the whole way through because the image ended up looking like crap when I was done. But I let AI talk me through it. So to the layperson, AI always sounds really, really good. But if you're a subject matter expert, you start to see the holes. And that's what I think people need to take away from AI generated work. We should not fear as artists that AI generated work is going to take our jobs, because the people that are willing to pay and the people that are willing that know good art will always know good art. Like I just had a shoot this morning with a buddy of mine who's playing Santa Claus downtown in Kansas City. And I shot it with my Sony A1. And when I look at these shots, I can see pores in his face and it looks so detailed and lifelike that, I mean, you almost can imagine milk and cookies being put in front of your face by this man. But then I have a cell phone shot that I took just as like it's kind of like I look at it from back in the day. Ansel Adams used to carry a Polaroid with him because it was the same aspect ratio of a 4x5. So when he would shoot the Polaroid, he could get his composition and then he could get his camera lined up and then shoot. So a lot of times I'll use my cell phone in the same way just to take a quick snapshot of what a processed version of that might look like. So I'm looking at this snapshot of him and I'm like, you can't see the life in this man's face, but you can with that highly detailed camera. Now, that's not saying that in 20 years or, even 5 years from now, we might not have that same capability with AI. And when we get to that point, we're going to have a different road that we're going to have to cross. But I think that there's going to be so much stuff that's going to get put into our cameras that is going to help us in that way, that you're probably going to see some of this computational stuff happening in camera. Like I wouldn't doubt that at some point we're going to be able to put our style into some type of profile that would go into our camera, that when we take a picture, the raw file already looks processed before we even put it onto our computer. I see a day where that's coming. So I think that will probably aid us and help us as photographers against that. And you're always going to have your people like us that want to be that technician, right? That really want to make sure that artistic technician that puts all that flair into it. We're still going to have that. I don't think that's ever going to go away. So I don't really fear AI. I kind of look at AI as, almost like a new challenge. And honestly, I like it. I like the fact that AI came out and made our life more difficult because it's making my artwork exponentially better. Because I feel like I need to compete with it.
Yeah, exactly. You need to distinguish your work, and it needs to, your style, your approach, the way you do things needs to be a way that AI or whatever could just simply never replicate. And it's just that much more motivation to be authentic, to lean into your vision, to ignore the naysayers and the critics and everything we've talked about to this point. Just lean into becoming who you're meant to be and following your voice, your vision, and just loving every second of the learning process and the growth process. If there was one thing that you could give listeners, if you could give them one piece of advice about trusting their vision, what would it be?
I would say the most important thing about your artistic vision, because being very close to my art, is accept it as an extension of who you are, and knowing that no one, not a single person on this planet, not one of them, is as unique as you are, and therefore your vision is unique. And it doesn't matter. I know that there's a lot of people that have pain and wounding from maybe thinking that their voice isn't important and therefore they silence themselves. This is a space, your vision is your uniqueness that you can provide that nobody else can provide. And that is a version of your voice that more than likely is going to speak louder than you. So accept it. Don't disregard your vision. Don't try to emulate somebody else's vision. A, it's not going to happen. And B, you're not going to be very happy with your artwork if you go down that path. Accept who you are, accept what you do with your images, and know that that's the gift that you provide the world.
Very well said. It's the most liberating thing when you finally hit that point of, I'm going to shoot what I enjoy. I'm going to edit the way I like, and I'm going to be who I want to be. And it comes back to something my dad always used to tell me all through school and just all through my youth. Nobody can beat you at being you. So live like it.
That's awesome.
It's something that's motivated me in my art, in my personal life, across everything. It's just a reminder, lean into who you're meant to be and be genuine, be authentic. You'll find your happiness there.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that.
Blake, I certainly want to say thank you for jumping on an episode and kicking off season 2 here and getting everything going here. Excellent discussion, excellent points, just really great time. How can people find you, find F64 Academy, and get involved with some of your online educational offers?
Sure. So the easiest way is f64academy.com. That's a place where you can sign up to the email list if you choose to do so. And then F64 Academy on YouTube is where I do all my free content that you can enjoy. But if you really, 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 really want to go deep, f64elite.com. I'm not trying to make anybody elitist. I just want them to look at their work from an elite level. So I go really deep there. I do critique sessions. I do round tables like this where we just meet on Zoom and talk. And it's really a great community of people who are now coming together to create their own communities. And it's really, really beautiful seeing what's happening in that world. So, if you just want to dabble, F64Academy.com is a great place. But if you really want to take stuff to the next level, F64Elite.com.
And I'll include all those links in the show notes below so you listeners can go check it out. Check out some of his educational content, his photography. Awesome guy, awesome educator. As someone who's been in the different courses, very good stuff. So, Blake, thank you so much for putting this stuff together for us. Thank you for jumping on the episode. Been a great time, man.
Absolutely. It's been awesome. I can't wait to come back. It's going to happen again. It has to.
Oh, it definitely will. Another huge thank you to Blake for joining us. Outstanding discussion. If you guys haven't yet, make sure to check out his links included in the show notes below. As someone who learned so much from his resources, I highly encourage you to take a look at F64 Academy if you guys want to go deeper on editing, craft, and building a voice that actually feels like you. In the next episode, we're keeping this momentum rolling with Ian Plant. Join us as we dig into what it really takes to create photographs with intention, how to think beyond superficial beauty, and make stronger decisions in the field, all while building a body of work that holds up over time. Make sure that you are following along on your favorite podcast platform so that you can be notified as soon as the episode becomes available. If you guys would like to support the show in Season 2, you can do so through the Ko-fi link in the show notes below. As always, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Take care, everybody.